Welcome to Health Professional Radio. I'm your host, Neil Howard. Thank you so much for joining us for another segment. We're going to be speaking with Dr. Ginna Laport. She's joining us here as VP and Global Head of Lymphoma, CLL Development at Genentech, to discuss the various types of blood cancers, historic challenges with the treatment of those cancers, and the recent momentum that she's seen in blood cancer therapeutic development. Welcome to Health Professional Radio, Dr. Laport.
Thank you, Neil. Happy to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
As VP and Global Head of Lymphoma there at Genentech, give us a brief look into your professional background and talk about what it means to VP at Genentech.
Sure. So I'm a hematologist oncologist by training. I joined Genentech a little bit under 2 years ago. Most of my background has been in academia. I was a professor of bone marrow transplant and hematologic malignancies at Stanford for 15 years. And before then, I was on faculty in hematology oncology at the University of Pennsylvania and also at the University of Chicago. I left academia in 2015 after doing nearly 19 to 20 years of clinical and translational research, and then joined the pharmaceutical industry. I worked in biotech for a few years, working with solid tumors and checkpoint inhibitors, but then decided to come back to my roots of hematologic malignancies and joined Genentech as the VP of Lymphoma CLL Development at Genentech. And what that means is that I oversee and conduct all of the clinical trials in our pipeline using our pipeline drugs that are for lymphoma, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and chronic lymphocytic leukemia. So I oversee different teams of people that develop these trials, work with academic sites to get drugs through phase 1, 2, and 3 trials, eventually to the FDA and other regulatory agencies to reach approval and then become available to patients worldwide.
So you deal with a wide variety of different types of blood cancers.
Correct.
Why is it important that we learn more about the different types of blood cancers, and when do we recognize blood cancer as an awareness month?
So blood cancer, it's more prevalent than people realize. In the U.S. right now, close to 200,000 cases a year are diagnosed in this country, which makes up about 10% of all the cancer cases diagnosed over the past year. The most common types are blood cancer of leukemia, lymphoma, and myeloma. For Blood Cancer Awareness Month, it was in September last month, and during Blood Cancer Awareness Month, so we certainly put out through social media, increase awareness of what we do, the work we do, and we also work with patient advocacy groups to really channel what our pipeline and like which diseases we're working on, which diseases besides leukemia, lymphoma, myeloma, the drugs that we're developing to treat these various diseases. So it's really about, during Blood Cancer Awareness, it's about raising awareness what we, the clinicians, what the researchers at Genentech are doing to advance diagnosis and treatment of blood cancers.
Now, any type of blood cancer is a serious thing, but I do understand that there are some that are a bit more difficult and challenging to treat than others. Is that correct?
Correct. The more challenging ones are like acute leukemia, also known as AML, acute myeloid leukemia, for lymphoma, diffuse large B-cell lymphoma. And these are more serious because they're what's called rapidly progressive. They can grow very quickly, and patients can become sick very quickly. There are some diseases called CLL, like chronic lymphocytic leukemia, that actually patients can live 10, 15, 20, 30 years with chronic lymphocytic leukemia because they're more what's called indolent. They're very slow growing. Many times they don't need treatment right away. So it's a large span of how these cancers behave depending on which diagnosis a patient receives.
Is there a specific unmet need in some of the areas of cancer research?
Yes, absolutely. I think the good news is, the good news with these cancers, blood cancers, and say all cancers in general, is that we've come a long way, but invariably many of these patients will relapse or the disease will come back.
What is Genentech doing to address some of the unmet needs in this area?
Well, here at Genentech, we have quite an expansive clinical development program. With a pipeline, there's a wide range of molecular targets and combinations of therapies. We identify which blood cancers have the highest unmet need, and then our scientists develop new approaches to improve initial treatment, address resistance and relapse, and ultimately help people live longer and extend remissions. One of the most exciting class of drugs that we're developing are bispecific antibodies, which are a type of immunotherapy that allows patients to initiate treatment more quickly. And this is a type of therapy. It's not chemotherapy, so it doesn't have the same toxicities as chemotherapy. And this type of therapy is an innovative type of therapy that engages the patient's immune system to fight the cancer. So we hope that by pushing the boundaries of these scientific understanding, addressing different targets, using different modes of administration, that we can help accelerate improvement of care across all of the different types of blood cancers.
Do you have ongoing research, or is there ever a lapse?
I'm actually not. Fortunately for us at Genentech Roche, and I can't say we're unique to this, but all of the pharmaceutical industry, we all, as far as the pipeline of drugs, we have so many trials ongoing, what we call the phase 1, phase 2, early phase trials, which are first in human trials, versus late stage trials, which are trials that are trying actually very close to FDA approval. And we have, like you'd say, so many eggs in the basket going on at so many different points of time in what we call different stages of drug development that we're never out of, I guess we're never bored. We never run out of things to do. We've got so many balls in the air that it's a good problem to have because there's so much to study and so much more to do.
Obviously, COVID-19 has complicated things as far as research and development is concerned across the board. But of course, blood cancers were around long before COVID-19. How has this pandemic affected your research efforts and some of the treatments that maybe were just about to be tested and released? Maybe some of those have been put on hold, or has this pandemic accelerated some of your research?
Actually, that's a very good question. It's a question that many have asked us. Initially, when the pandemic really clutched the world in 2000, the first half of 2020, many clinical trials were affected. And by affected, I mean it's either because hospitals either slowed down or clinical trials, the staff needed to put patients in clinical trials were working from home, and as many as the workforce stayed home, there was less there was less nurses or doctors to either enroll patients in clinical trials or for the patients who already were on clinical trials to monitor them, because when a patient's on a clinical trial, they have to have blood tests regularly, they need to have imaging like PET scans or CT scans done regularly. So there was an initial slowdown, but I can confidently say that it's almost back to the way it was now pre-pandemic. Hospitals and physicians, the pharmaceutical industry, they all became innovative. One way is, as you know, telehealth, the use of telehealth really skyrocketed during the pandemic. And, we've allowed telehealth visits to serve as in-person clinic visits to meet clinical trial requirements, when it's certainly appropriate. And, we understand that when patients need to get a blood test or an imaging scan done later, then we definitely work around that. So we become more innovative, I think, telehealth and doing more remote monitoring versus like as the doctors do. So I think for now, it slowed research down a little bit earlier, but for now, it's definitely picked up the way it was. And in answer to your question about did it accelerate research? I can't say it definitely accelerated research for blood cancers, but as you know, worldwide, it certainly exponentially accelerated research for all the diagnosis and treatment related to COVID, with the vaccines, with the testing, with the treatments. So that was one, maybe call it a silver lining, is that I think everyone came together, the regulators, the pharmaceutical industry, the physicians, to get the best drugs and the best tests out there as fast as possible when this global need hit the world.
Well, if you would give us a website where our listeners can learn more about what you're doing there at Genentech.
Our website for Genentech is www.gene.com. On that website, it's a very user-friendly website, and you can certainly type in any type of cancer, and you can certainly find the blood cancers like leukemia, lymphoma, myeloma, and it will direct you to the pipeline and the research we're doing in those specific diseases.
Well, it has been a pleasure speaking with you this evening, Dr. Laport. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you. Very nice to meet you.
You've been listening to Health Professional Radio. I'm your host, Neil Howard, in conversation with Dr. Ginna Laport, VP and Global Head of Lymphoma at Genentech. Audio copies of this program are available at hpr.fm and healthprofessionalradio.com.au. You can also subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, listen in, download at SoundCloud, and be sure and subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/Health Professional Radio.